As I told you, so much like your father.
Will I see you again?
Perhaps.
Welcome back, everyone. This is The Way. Ahsoka started and Luke Skywalker is nowhere to be seen. He's not helping Ahsoka deal with Thrawn or this threat from the Remnant Empire, the Shadow Council as they're being called in this part of the timeline, even though what they're doing right now is heavily based on the original Thrawn trilogy, Heir to the Empire from the 90s. That storyline completely revolved around Luke Skywalker, so it is a bit strange that they're trying to step around the character so much right now. I'll explain what's going on with him and how they're going to use the character going forward. He will be part of the upcoming Thrawn storyline. If you're brand new to the channel, I'm doing weekly videos for all the Ahsoka episodes and for The Mandalorian Season 4 after this. The next big series after Ahsoka, chronologically, will be Loki Season 2. We'll talk about that during my Marvel videos. The larger Thrawn storyline will continue in Mando Season 4 before the Thrawn movie happens. That's why they had all the Shadow Council, Thrawn stuff at the end of The Mandalorian Season 3, because the Ahsoka storyline, like everything in this part of the timeline, is meant to cross over. They're using all the series right now to tell their Heir to the Empire storyline.
Grand Admiral Thrawn's return will herald in the re-emergence of our military.
The last we saw of Luke Skywalker, he was training Grogu in the Force like a traditional Jedi. That was the whole thing with his Jedi Academy, is that he was pursuing or trying to rebuild a Jedi Academy and rebuild the traditional Jedi Order. They didn't get into this during his episode, but he's on the planet Ossus. That was another deep cut from the Legends canon that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau brought back. It used to be the home of the Jedi Order for many thousands of years after their initial schism with the Order that predated the Jedi. If James Mangold gets to make that Jedi origin story movie set 25,000 years ago, some of this stuff will become canon again. But before the Jedi Order, light side, dark side Force users were all part of the same order called the Jedi on the planet Tython, which they also used during The Mandalorian Season 2, recanonizing that. That order was something more akin to the Dai Bendu. The Bendu was a concept Dave Filoni also recanonized in Star Wars Rebels. It was in the original treatment for Star Wars A New Hope when George Lucas was creating the idea of Force users in the Jedi.
Jedi and Sith wield the Ashlar and Bogan, the light and the dark. I'm the one in the middle, the Bendu.
They had a schism, and the light side Force users left to start what you now know as the regular Jedi Order on the planet Ossus. The dark side Force users left to eventually be killed by the new Jedi Order, like they had some subsequent wars. Then a group of survivors from those dark side Force users eventually found the Sith race, and the Sith Empire was born, and the rest was history. This is all Knights of the Old Republic era stuff. They might get into this in future movies and series if they start doing more after this Origin of the Jedi movie. It just depends on what happens in the next several years. Needless to say, Luke Skywalker making his Jedi Academy on Ossus is like them bringing things full circle with the Legends canon origin of the Jedi. He intended for Grogu to be his first real student at this academy. Technically, Leia was his student briefly around the events of Mandalorian Season 1, like about 5 years after Return of the Jedi, but she was only with him for a little while before she left to give birth to Ben Solo. Then when given the choice, Grogu chose to leave his academy, return to Mando after only 2 years of Jedi training. He was with Luke Skywalker for 2 years, according to Jon Favreau, even though the way they cut the episodes together between all the shows, it seemed like he was barely there. That was how they explained Grogu getting way more powerful so quickly. Luke Skywalker, also on top of having 2 years with him to just do basic Jedi training, helped him unlock his Jedi training he'd done back at the Jedi Academy before Order 66. And you have to remember that Grogu is over 50 years old, closer to his mid-50s now because so much time has gone by since Mando Season 1, so he had been at the Jedi Academy for years, since well before the events of Phantom Menace. Grogu then leaves to continue his own exploration of the Force that's separate from Luke Skywalker, more traditional Jedi teachings. He'll pursue his own path, just like Ahsoka. That's meant to be their connection they share. They don't consider themselves traditional Jedi, even though there's a lot of Jedi training left in them and Jedi beliefs. That was why people got so confused when they were dropping Ahsoka trailers and they kept calling her a Jedi, because during Rebels, she very clearly told Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader, that she was no Jedi.
I will avenge his death.
Revenge is not the Jedi way.
I am no Jedi.
But while Luke was training Grogu, Ahsoka visited them. Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau haven't said exactly how long she was with the two of them. It was only supposed to be a little while. She wasn't there for the entire 2 years that Grogu was there. The whole idea is that her visiting Luke was meant to pay off all those fan questions everybody had about her relationship with Anakin Skywalker's children. After the Clone Wars episodes, the Rebels episodes, so much of Star Wars revolved around Luke Skywalker and Leia, just in that part of the timeline, that everyone kept asking if Ahsoka ever learned about them and if she ever met them, because at least up to that point, we never actually seen that happen on screen. So I don't think any of the books covered their meeting either or them referencing each other, so it was like a really big deal in Star Wars to have them actually meet each other on screen. The way that Jon Favreau talked about it after the fact, her visit was more about her just checking in with Luke to see how his Jedi Academy was doing and how Grogu was doing, because now they also share this connection to the Force, like she and Grogu have a connection. While she was there, even though she only briefly alluded to it, she basically is meant to have talked to Luke about his father, Anakin Skywalker, and Luke is meant to have told her what happened on the Death Star during his final days in Return of the Jedi. The whole idea that he ultimately redeemed himself and turned back to the light side, trying to kill the Emperor before he died. There was a ton of lore that they had to pay off, like did Ahsoka feel Anakin's death in the Force when he passed? Did she have a Force vision or feel what was happening during their battle on the Death Star? What was Ahsoka doing when that happened? She was meant to be a very active part of the rebellion, so like she was around during the events of Return of the Jedi, the original trilogy, is that most of it was spent in the Outer Rim, serving as the fulcrum character, like the point of communications between all these rebel cells. Part of the issue with the Ahsoka character is that she wasn't created till like after Revenge of the Sith came out in theaters, so they had to find a way to explain what she was doing during the original trilogy, while they couldn't just go back to those original movies and just edit her into them. Then there's the idea they had to address what's going to be Ahsoka's relationship with Anakin's children going forward in the timeline. Because, for instance, her species lived much longer than humans. Force-sensitive members of her race lived to about 200 years old. So even when Luke and Leia die in the distant future, she'd still be around middle age during that time period. She'd look about the same that she does now. The idea right now is that even though most of Star Wars storytelling is following Grogu, Mando, Ahsoka, the Mandalorian's perspective, Luke Skywalker is still meant to be a big part of what's going on right now in the timeline with the Thrawn character. Most of the big changes they've made to the original Heir to the Empire storyline are in service of them avoiding having to do too much CG deep fake Luke Skywalker, so they find a lot of ways for him to not be around all the time. The in-canon universe reason why Ahsoka didn't tell Luke about all the Thrawn stuff that's going on in the Space Whales, the Purrgils, Ezra Bridger, whether you agree with it or not, is that he's continuing to build his Jedi Academy, busy with that, searching for more Force-sensitive students, which he has not found yet. They're still in that in-between time period after Grogu has left and before a bunch of other students begin at his academy, like a young Ben Solo. That's meant to still be a few years off of all the Thrawn Heir to the Empire storyline that they're doing right now. I think the idea is that if Dave Filoni's first Thrawn movie goes well, they do a full trilogy for that, then there might be some overlap with the ending of that last movie and Luke Skywalker getting a bunch more Jedi Padawan students. They do plan to involve him in the Thrawn movie. There might be another small cameo scene right before that just to address his involvement during the actual movie, but they're not going to do a giant Star Wars movie in this part of the timeline after doing so much Luke Skywalker the last few years and then not let him come back and be part of that. Most of you noticed this during The Mandalorian Season 2 and the Book of Boba Fett, but by the time they got to the Boba Fett episodes, their technology for doing deep fake Luke Skywalker had gotten way, way better, and they felt way more confident in giving him a bunch more speaking lines, generally doing way more, a much bigger scene. That's because they were using all of his cameos to test their technology and figure out how to do characters like that so they could pull off cameos like this without it ruining the memory of the characters. Generally, though, they try to stay away from way too much deepfake cameo stuff from any of the characters. But there's like a bare minimum that you need so that the storyline makes sense. Like, it would be weirder if they never did Luke Skywalker at all during this part of the timeline. The other major reason why Ahsoka didn't have a long conversation with Luke about Thrawn is because they were just leaving that for later in the timeline during a later episode at some point, right before they want to bring the Luke character back into the story. That way, it's much easier for them to change Luke's story in the future if they think of a better story for him or a better way to use the character. The other major reason why you haven't seen Luke Skywalker in the first couple episodes of Ahsoka is because they're waiting to like the last possible moment to bring him back before the Thrawn movie, and mostly the Skywalker who's relevant to Ahsoka in her storyline is Anakin Skywalker. That's why you've seen so many Anakin Skywalker scenes in all the Ahsoka trailers. The new voiceover dialogue that Hayden Christensen recorded, that dialogue is a flashback to him training Ahsoka during the Clone Wars. We might get to see that as an actual flashback scene. It could just be a voiceover, a cameo scene of her remembering, but fingers crossed that they actually shot new footage for it. The major stuff that they've changed from the original Thrawn trilogy so far is the original Luke Skywalker cloning plot became the Grogu cloning plot. They've largely wrapped that up. That was meant to be just Moff Gideon's plan. The other members of the Shadow Council didn't really know or care about what was going on with that. They have not done Mara Jade. A lot of people asking about that. That could wind up changing, but I'm not going to hold my breath because she became Luke Skywalker's wife, the mother of his child, who was named Ben Solo after Obi-Wan Kenobi, and they just used the Ben Solo name for Kylo Ren. Luke and Leia had twins instead of just the one child, and Dave Filoni already used the Jason name from Legends for Hera and Kanan's son, Jason Syndulla, and he's going to show up in the Ahsoka episode soon. This is the back of his head in the trailers. I don't know who's playing the character, though. During that original Thrawn storyline, the Jedi Master that Thrawn was working with was named Joruus, and Ray Stevenson's character is called Baylan Skoll. His backstory is completely different, and what Thrawn had that Jedi Master doing originally was totally different. There was a whole Mount Tantus plot. Palpatine was a much bigger part of the story, even though he was dead at the time, which Dave Filoni kind of repurposed in the Bad Batch episodes. He turned that Mount Tantus plot into the Grogu cloning stuff and Emperor Palpatine cloning. And we just found out about the latest change too. Instead of being lost in another galaxy, like they are in Ahsoka, Thrawn had been searching the unknown regions, which is just another part of the main galaxy. There'll probably be a bunch more changes to the original Thrawn storyline throughout the Ahsoka episodes. I'll point them out when we see them. Like they're kind of taking things in a new direction, and it's loosely based now on the original Thrawn trilogy. So you'll see a lot of familiar things, especially if you're a child of the 90s and the 80s. Let me know in the comments, when do you want them to bring Luke Skywalker back into the Thrawn storyline in present day? And if you have any other requests for bonus videos, write them in the comments below. My full Ahsoka Episode 3 video will post after they release it. Click here for that. I'll update the link as soon as I post that. And click here for all my other Ahsoka episodes. Thank you so much for watching. Everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.